Good afternoon, everyone. Just giving folks a few minutes to jump in. We have uh, a packed house today, and then a lot of content to go through. So we're excited to get started here in just another minute. All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's just after 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar for the Genesis Mission Phase 1 opportunity. Next slide. You'll see in front of you a couple of our key program staff members that will be presenting today. My name is Grayson Dorr. I'm fortunate to serve as the program manager for CadetWorks. With me on the call is a number of our team members joining us, as well as our senior project manager, Kelsey Hamilton, who will be facilitating some of the Q&A features as well. Next slide. Just a couple meeting housekeeping items, and I see a few that are already coming through the chat. Just as a overall setup for today's webinar, this session will be recorded. Both the recording, the transcript, and the slides will be posted to our Application Hub, SBR Application Hub website. So you can go back and share that or view these the additional questions you might have not seen if you have to leave for whatever reason early as well. We ask that you use the chat feature only for technical issues that you may be having, whether you can't hear me or if you run into anything else. So just keep that chat feature specific to those types of questions. Speaking of that, I'm just doing a quick audio check with everyone from our side, with DOE and ConnectWorks, if you can hear me clear.
Yes, Grayson, you sound great.
Thank you, Kelsey. Again, please reserve the Q&A box. You'll see that in the very far right-hand corner. You may have to select more on your tile as well. I would encourage for everyone to use that box for submitting your questions. That is important because those questions are downloaded. We can look at the responses we may have not been able to answer and follow up, as well as it captures your contact information for us to do so. Overall, as a best practice, I know there's a number of questions you all may have, especially as we get started. We've built a robust amount of questions on our website for the Application Hub, both under our resources as well as the actual opportunity page. As we're getting started, I would encourage you to pull that up, and we'll show these links shortly where you can view those. Any questions specific to those that we've already answered on our website, we more than likely won't call out. We'll try to reserve the time today for any program specific questions or anything that we have not addressed. And so please try to group your questions as well. It's a good practice. That way we can go through and make sure we're answering all collectively as well. It kind of keeps that line a little bit more succinct as we go through it. And as well, we would encourage you all, there's a brief survey as we close and wrap up. It's just a couple questions. If you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments just to submit that, helps us better prepare for future webinars and engagement with you all. Next slide. A little bit about ConnectWorks. ConnectWorks is one of the partnership intermediaries with the Department of Energy. Specifically, we work with the Office of Technology Commercialization, or OTC, as many of you are familiar with, and again, are excited to join you all here today. Some of the resources, very brief on our side, and I'll turn it over to Eileen Chant for the next portion. But the mission of ConnectWorks is really to engage, match, and collaborate. That's why we're here today, and across many of the sectors for the DOE. And we're excited to have launched the application hub for SBIR, STTR, and really stood that up in the last couple months with a lot of work and focus geared on that. So you'll see there's a mailing list link where you can join. We won't overcrowd your inbox. It'll stay specific to upcoming opportunities, webinars, things like that, as well as you can follow us on LinkedIn, on ConnectWorks with that as well. Throughout the presentation, we'll have some links to all of this we'll post in the chat. That way you can access that as well. In addition to the SBIR application hub, we also have a ConnectWorks website where you'll see other opportunities we have outside of SBIR, working with a number of the various program offices at DOE for that. One of the divisions of ATI, who ultimately oversees ConnectWorks, is Tech Connect. We're excited to be attending again in the fall for the SBIR STTR Fall Innovation Conference. You'll see if you're in the area at the Gaylord around those dates, we'd love to see you. We'll be at booth 615 along with OTC, and we'll have the SBIR Pavilion as well, with not only DOE represented there, all other federal agencies as well. So we'd love to have you join us and stop by and mention you attended the webinar and chat with you. That is my spiel. Hopefully I took 2 minutes longer than I wanted to, because we want to reserve as much of the time for the content, but excited to turn this over to you, Eileen, for your portion.
Thank you, Grayson. Hi, everybody. Eileen Chan. I'm a program manager with the OTC SBIR, STDR programs. I'm going to give you a little bit of overview of the programs. So next slide. Okay, so the federal SBIR and STTR programs, as some of you may know, are spread across the federal government in 11 agencies. 11 agencies have SBIR programs, and 6 agencies of the largest agencies have STTR programs. The Small Business Act mandates that 3.2% of each of those agencies' federal R&D, extramural R&D, must go into this program, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, so that small businesses can participate in technology development that is strengthens the national economy and meets the missions of the various agencies. In addition to the 3.2% that comes out of the extramural R&D, 0.45% comes out for the STTR program. That program is specifically designed to enable technology transfer between nonprofit research institutions and small businesses, where small businesses are developing and commercializing the technology. The phases of SBIR are shown here on the left side. These are specific to the DOE program. They vary a little bit. The award sizes vary a little bit from one agency to another. Phase 1 is a feasibility study. That's this particular pilot. This particular opportunity is about a feasibility study, something that you want to propose, a proof of concept study that you want to perform on your technology idea that is consistent with the topics that we have. So phase 1 is a 12-month feasibility study. If that study is successful, there's an opportunity to turn that into a phase 2 award, which is up to $2 million over a 2-year period. In that case, you're going to be prototyping and demonstrating your technology and starting to pivot towards commercialization. Small businesses that need more time and money to commercialize their technology can move to a second phase 2 award. And there's a third phase 2 award, which we're going to talk, a special third phase 2 award, which we're going to talk about in a second. Phase 3 is graduating from the SBIR program. You're not using SBIR funding, but you're getting funding from another source, whether it's federal government or the private sector. Next slide. DOE is the third largest agency offering an SBIR STTR program, with Department of War being the largest and the Health and Human Services being second largest in the federal government. Our program involves 13 different offices at the current time. There are, the Office of Science has actually listed here. There's a little bit of reorganizing with respect to these offices. The Office of Science is now 5 offices that will be offering topics and funding technologies consistent with their mission. And what we call the applied offices, which are shown here, are 7 offices, which also will be offering topics that are consistent with and designed to advance their mission while also enabling commercialization of the technologies. Next slide. Okay, one of the very important things about SBIR, before you start with your launch into developing your pitch and your application, please ensure that you are eligible for the SBIR program. You must be a for-profit business, and any kind of generally recognized business, an LLC, sole proprietorship, an incorporated organization, etc., is eligible. You must be a for-profit business. The business also must be owned, majority owned and controlled by individuals who are citizens or permanent residents of the United States. And then there's some other stipulations. You can be a for-profit business that is owned or controlled by it's owned by other organizations, by other for-profited businesses that are controlled by U.S. citizens or permanent resident aliens. So there are some restrictions on venture capital ownership. You should take a look at that. At this point, there are some allowances for venture capital ownership, but it cannot be majority owned or control, and those organizations cannot be large companies as well. A small business is liberally defined by the Small Business Administration as 500 employees or fewer. So that's a pretty large small business. As long as you have 500 or fewer employees, you qualified. And then also importantly, essentially all research and development that is paid for by the SBIR STTR funding must be performed in the United States. Next slide. And then there's one other thing I want to say about the eligibility requirements is that you do not need to necessarily be a small business at the time of the application, but you do need to be ready to pull the trigger on that and to incorporate or establish your business legally at the time of receipt of award. It's very common for some companies to be forming a business contingent on an SBIR STTR award, and that is allowed as well. But you do really need to be ready to go. Okay, SBIR has some specific requirements that are a little bit different than STTR. The principal investigator must be primarily employed by the small business. That means 51% of their employment hours must be with the small business. There are what we call level of effort requirements associated with SBIR. The small business must perform 2/3 of the R&D at the location of the small business, where 1/3 can be subcontracted out. Now, you do need sometimes to round out your team with subcontractors, with subject matter experts or nonprofit research institutions. So that can be up to 1/3 of the R&D. And then it changes in phase 2 to 1/2 completed by the small business. You're allowed to partner with a nonprofit research institution, etc. It's optional, and it can only be it can be that 1/3 that can be subcontracted out. Next slide. STTR is a little bit different. The minimum level of effort is 40% for the small business and 30% for the mandatory research partner, which must be a nonprofit institution, such as a college, a university, a national lab, or other nonprofit research organizations. And one other difference about the STTR program is that the PI can be primarily employed by the research institution, as well as the small business. Make note of your intellectual property agreement. You're cooperating with a nonprofit research institution, and make sure you have those agreements tamped down before you begin your work. Next slide. Okay, so there's a pitch. That's the first stage here. There's a pitch stage. Only meritorious pitch applications will be invited to submit a full application. So your pitch is a gate to participating in the full application process. I won't go over the details here of how to participate, but please review the links that are provided here in that 1 through 4. And also note that we are having, note the timelines that are shown here below. We are here now at the 385 webinar, but there's another one a week from today, which focuses on the application process and answering your questions. So please hop on that call a week from today. The applications will open in mid-August. And please note that your pitch is due no later than September 10th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Next slide. I talked a lot about this in the first slide about what phase 1 is, proof of concept, award size. You will move to phase 2, potentially to a second phase 2. Note that there's no application that's going to be required. That's going to be a go, no go decision when you move through these phases. There's a third phase 2 award that's called the Strategic Breakthrough Award. This is a newly authorized program. Those awards can be much larger. They're going to be for very highly strategic projects. And the additional funding is really going to be about finalizing your commercialization readiness for the marketplace. Next slide. I've already talked about phase 3. Here is the pitch questions, and these are the review criteria of your pitch. You have very few words. You have 100 words to talk about how your idea aligns with the topic and the mission of the program that's offering that topic. The technical promise will touch on significance, how novel your idea is, and the feasibility of your idea in 200 words or less. The commercialization potential, again, 200 words or less. You have to describe your value proposition, your competitive advantage, and your go-to market strategy. Each of these is probably, I estimate, about 10 sentences each. So being concise and very clear is going to be very important in your pitch. And finally, the last section is team qualifications. In 200 words or less, describe how you are qualified to execute the proposed project in terms of the company's experience, your partnership's experience, and the financials associated with being able to execute this effort. Next slide. For those meritorious pitches that are invited to submit a full application, you can see here on the right side of the slide, we talk about the technical merit review criteria for a successful application associated with this funding opportunity. In the interest of time, I'm just going to touch on these 3 areas: the technical promise. The commercialization potential is going to be an important part of your phase 1 application, as well as the team qualifications. And obviously, you're going to have a lot more real estate in the full application to explain and detail all of this information and touch on all the bullets that are shown here on the right side of the slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, I am turning it over to the Inspector General presenter. Grayson, are you going to introduce?
Sorry about that, Eileen. Just had to find the unmute. Yep, happy to transition to the next portion of the presentation. And looks like on the schedule we have Raymond and Alexander covering that.
Hi, good afternoon to most of you. My name is AJ Ferrari. I'm a special agent with the Department of Energy's Office of Inspector General. And if you haven't worked with government grants in the past, you may not know that each department has its own Office of Inspector General. And part of that, we have investigations and we have audits. I'm with the investigations branch, and we look into potential waste, fraud, and abuse at the department level, whether it's within our contracts, whether it's bribery, whether it's, we have a lot of different types of investigations we do, but with SBIRs, we look at fraud in either the application or in a lot of the reporting. And so what Eileen talked about with eligibility, that was spot on with, it's very important to know that stuff. And one of the reasons why is when we come looking at a potential grant, when we have a complaint, we want to look at, okay, well, did this person lie in order to get the funding? So part of that application process, plagiarized proposal, also think of it as duplicative proposal. So if you do apply to Department of Energy, but also Department of War or to HHS with the same type of technology, you need to disclose that. It says right there, it won't go against you if you tell us, hey, you've applied to multiple different programs, but if you hide it from us, that can be an issue. If you get funding from both of us to do the same work, that is potentially a crime or a civil violation. False information regarding the company. With SBIRs, it is a lot of rules around whether or not you're eligible. So if you actually are affiliated with a larger company and you hide that from the Department of Energy in your application, potential that would be a civil or criminal a violation. If your principal investigator is actually full-time somewhere else and stays full-time there while you're actually doing the grant, could be possible that we would look at that as a criminal civil violation. Also, reporting on what you did, if there's falsehoods in that could be a potential issue we would look into. And also, if you're looking for funding, that's something that already has been done and you're just trying to, get more money, just make sure that, you speak with either program managers and say, this is actually building upon what we've done in the past. It's not just rehashing something in order to, keep people working. During that award, you just need to use it for what you're saying you're going to be using it for. In that application process, there's going to be something where you say, I have the ability to keep track of these funds, and saying it's going to something that's done for the research. You can't go out there and people will rent houses, they will buy cars, they will do things that aren't allowed under the rules of the grant. And that is that's frowned upon by Department of Justice whenever we present something like that. And let's see, claiming results for an award that were funding from a different source. So again, you're getting duplicative funding. Next slide. And so these are the ones, again, it might go over a lot of the pieces that Eileen talked about. But, if you have a company that is over 500 people, is not majority American owned, you need to tell the selecting officials and, your program managers about those things and work it out before you start getting funding, because you don't want to be receiving funding that you shouldn't have received and then have us look into it. And then there's, like I said, potential criminal or civil violations. The SBIR's PI, it's something that is, somewhat specific to SBIRs if you are receiving funding from other sources other than that. And so they do have to have employment that is more than, you can't have employment of 20 or more hours anywhere else. So you can't be a full-time or even, 30-hour-a-week professor somewhere and then also be the PI for an SBIR. You can figure out how, that might get structured differently, but if you just lie to us about it, that is where it becomes an issue. Again, the amount of research done by the grantee versus outside, either subcontractors, consultants, just be very clear about, how much is being done by your company, and then also keeping track of that so that, if it is looked at by us, then you can say, look, I did do this much. One of the things is when you are a recipient of government funds, there are audit clauses. There are things that you have to report back to us if we do ask for the information. And we also have subpoena authority. So it's something that, just be aware that when you receive the federal funding, that there are certain things that responsibilities that confer with that. And then, the R&D being performed in the United States. Almost always it's all R&D. You talk to your program manager, they may very well say, hey, the only facility that can do this work is in another country, or the environment there is different. So if they say it's okay, they will put that in writing and tell you, yes, you may do this. Otherwise, it needs to be done in the United States. Next slide. And again, there are consequences for that. We are federal agents. We do have certain authorities that allow us to investigate, and then we work with the Department of Justice, and we will refer to them all of our facts and work with them if there are potential either false statements under the Civil False Claims Act. You can be required to pay back up to 3 times the damages, so that's the treble damages there. There's also potential for wire fraud and other fraud charges. And that can be against the company, it can be against individuals, and you can also potentially, if those happen, or we just find facts that show that you're not presently responsible, we can refer you to have your funding from any government source, federal government source, be suspended and debarred. So it's something that there are consequences for the company that, it's best just to be forthright and answer those questions correctly or truthfully, and should be fine. But if you try to, think that you can find a way around those, we have had a lot of examples of people who either have criminal or civil violations and sometimes convictions. And that's the next slide. This one's a little bit older. This is from 2015 on the next slide there. And there have been more recent ones. So if you do look up SBIR fraud and Department of Justice, you can see that not just from Department of Energy, but National Science Foundation, DCIS, which is Department of War's IG, several other ones, they are all working together. I've worked with several of them, NASA, and sometimes coming up with, cases that, individuals have received $10+ million that they weren't owed. And then I think, so Raymond, you were going to talk about, how to reach out to us if you do see something, if you'd like to report that, if it's, your own company or competitors, or just want to ask if something seems right.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. Okay, I will just build on the information AJ covered by briefly explaining how SBIR program participants can report suspected fraud, waste, or abuse. We have several different methods that people can report any allegations to the Office of Inspector General. We have the option, which is the preferred option, which is through our online portal. That is a simple, if anybody wants to pull that up, it's a simple Google search, and all you would look for is Department of Energy OIG complaint form, and that'll bring you to our online portal. Within that option, it'll have some other questions that we require, but it also allows you to enter a brief narrative of your complaint, and it gets into other questions as well related to our confidentiality agreements, which I will get to here in a second. And then the other methods are via our email. So you could submit your complaint via IG hotline at hq.doe.gov, and or our telephone number, or mail in a complaint, which again, all of this can be looked up with a simple Google search for DOE OIG complaint. The next item is our OIG confidentiality that I'd like to cover. And this essentially falls under one of two options. When a complainant reports suspected fraud, waste, or abuse to our office, the system itself, or one of the investigators on my team, will ask whether the person wants to remain confidential, meaning that they want to identify themselves to us, provide their information. However, they don't want us to use their name outside of the OIG. And then the other option is they identify themselves, but they also consent for us to use their name outside of the OIG. And then, of course, we also do accept anonymous complaints where the complainant does not identify themselves. But keep in mind, this limits our ability to ask follow-up questions for clarity, and it limits our ability to move forward with a review and investigation or whatever we deem necessary. The third item I'd like to cover, which is what makes a complaint actionable. So in that submission, whether it's through the online portal or through an email, we ask for the simple who, what, when, where, and how. How you know what you know. Essentially, we require enough specific information to evaluate the complaint. We're not asking anybody to prove their allegations, just to provide us enough information for us to look into the matter and then move forward. And then the fourth item is I'd like to just a quick overview as to what happens once a submission is brought to our attention. It's essentially we look for a nexus within the department. If we find that there is a nexus and it's within our wheelhouse, then we label it with a OIG file number, conduct our investigative review, and then myself or one of the other investigators on my team, we will brief senior OIG management, and then they will make a determination on how best to move forward, whether that's providing it to another office within the OIG or reach out to the program office or whatever the case may be. And that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you both. Yeah, we'll hold just for a few more moments on questions, and we'll transition to that. I want to make sure we have time to go through the Genesis mission specific slides. So Adam, I'll turn it over to you and let you kind of facilitate. I know you have a few slides going back and forth with various team members, so we'll let you cover that, and then we'll get after that to the Q&A feature or portion, excuse me.
All right, great. Thank you, Grayson. Much appreciated. Whenever you're ready to move to the next slide. Awesome. So greetings. My name is Adam Kitty. I'm a senior technical advisor in the Office of Science's Basic Energy Sciences program. And I was asked to kind of give a very brief overview of the Genesis mission. Certainly not enough time to go into any amount of detail. If you are interested in understanding kind of more about the department's Genesis mission, I would encourage you to visit genesis.energy.gov, and you'll be able to find all sorts of interesting information about the Genesis mission, the Genesis Mission Consortium, and other things that are part of this. So in brief, what is the Genesis mission? So Genesis mission was launched by Executive Order 14363 on November 24th of 2025. And it's a coordinated national effort led by the Department of Energy that is intended to establish a new era of AI accelerated discovery and technology innovation that can address the most challenging science and technology problems that we face today and going forward. So its goal is relatively simple, but quite powerful: to double the productivity and impact of American research and innovation within a decade. Now, I mentioned that Genesis mission is very broad, it includes a lot of things, but foundational to this Genesis mission is this American Science and Security Platform, a first of its kind capability that is enabled by the expertise of DOE's national laboratories, that is intended to be able to connect the world's best supercomputers, AI systems, next generation quantum computers, world-leading scientific instruments, and unique scientific data sets in order to help accelerate discovery and innovation across the science and technology ecosystem. Now, back in January of 2026, the Department of Energy released a set of 26 national science and technology challenges, as required by the executive order that launched the Genesis mission, that spanned the breadth of the department: science, energy, and security. Each of which was intended was identified in order to be to integrate AI, advanced computing, leading edge experimentation, and data realistically in a way to accelerate the pace of discovery and innovation. Now, in support of those challenges, the department announced just recently, on July 22nd, nearly $300 million in new awards under a request for applications titled "The Genesis Mission: Transforming Science and Energy with AI." These awards, which are supporting small teams of researchers from universities, DOE's labs, and industry, responded to 21 of these 26 science and technology challenges and 98 specific focus areas. Now, with this new Genesis mission, SBIR and STTR opportunity, the department is looking to kind of focus the innovative spirit of the small business community on a subset of the department's science and technology challenges identified for Genesis, and help further enhance the scope and impact of the Genesis mission. And through this pilot solicitation, DOE is intending to support approximately 40 SBIR STTR Phase 1 awards, totaling about $10 million in fiscal 26. The new solicitation It's introducing a more streamlined, applicant-focused approach to the program. I will note that a broader phase 1 funding opportunity covering a much larger range of technology topics is going to follow later in the year. So that's a rough overview of the Genesis mission. Again, genesis.energy.gov if you're interested in more information. And in the following slides, myself and some of my colleagues from multiple Office of Science programs are going to provide a quick overview of the kind of 4 topics that are included in this solicitation and some of the interests that their programs have in hearing from you, the small business community, on how you can advance these topics. I think the first up is my colleague, Carrie Perez.
Thanks, Adam. I'm Kari Perez. I'm a program manager within the Office of Science, Biological, and Environmental Research. Scaling the biotechnology revolution focuses on AI-driven innovations to design biology for DOE-relevant applications such as biochemicals and bioproducts. There are 4 main areas of interest included in this topic. The first area is biomolecular design. This area is looking for innovations that use AI to connect biomolecular structure with function and dynamics to advance biomolecular design for DOE applications. An example of a relevant technology could be using AI to integrate microbial enzyme structure and omics data to predict function of that enzyme. The second area of interest is engineering. Innovations are requested that use AI to accelerate plant microbiome design and engineering strategies to optimize production for DOE-relevant biotechnology applications under a range of conditions. An example could be using AI to predict gene expression, behavior, and interactions to accelerate bioengineering of microbes. The third area of interest is genotype to phenotype. Innovations are requested that use AI to predict plant and microbial phenotypes as well as interactions in mission-relevant settings, preferably with reduced data requirements. An example could be using AI to predict the outcomes of feedstock crops in field production settings. And finally, the last area of interest is bioreactor design and biomanufacturing. Innovations are requested that use AI to predict and address challenges of bioreactor design, scale-up, and integration through digital twin models. An example could be establishing a digital twin to predict scale-up of engineered microbes. For all of these areas of interest, examples of relevant metrics include, but are not limited to, prediction accuracy, product yield, decreased variability, resource efficiency, and adaptability to new conditions or products. So can go on to the next slide. I believe David is presenting.
Thank you, Kari. I'm David Bradson. I'm a program manager in the Office of Science, the Advanced Scientific Computing Research Program. And the second topic is called Realizing Quantum Systems for Discovery, AI for Quantum Computing and Networking. I'll note that the agency has undergone a shift recently. I think for many years, the focus, or one focus, was on a so-called NISQ computing, noisy intermediate scale quantum computing, using the hardware that has been available up to this point, which has been very limited because of decoherence. The new focus is really more on going beyond that NISQ era into fault tolerant and soon, we hope, a fully error-corrected quantum computing. So all of the topics listed in this paragraph are really trying to bridge that gap and get us to the next era. So from the hardware side, those could include better ideas for qubits, the control apparatus needed to deal with and implement quantum error correction. More on the software side, that includes error correcting codes. We're very interested in algorithms for scientific applications that will run on fault-tolerant quantum computers and eventually fully error-corrected quantum computers. We are also interested in approaches to distributed quantum computing, and by distributed, we don't mean there's a quantum computer here and there's an identical quantum computer in Brussels, and we want a quantum network that connects them. We would be more interested in practical applications where you have one type of quantum computer that has, for instance, a longer decoherence time and another, and therefore greater circuit depth, and another kind of a quantum computer that has more qubits, and the kind of local quantum networking that would connect those two. So that's a broad outline of what we're doing in quantum computing, and I will pass it back to Adam to talk about materials discovery.
Excellent. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. So I'm going to say a few things about, next slide, please. A few things about the topic, and then kind of touch on like some of the things, and certainly not an exhaustive list of things that the Basic Energy Sciences program kind of might be interested in receiving pitches for. So broadly speaking, materials innovation, it's really at the heart of the novel technologies that are vital to DOE's missions. And from our perspective, that could include energy generation, transformation, transmission, energy storage, as well as next generation computing and sensing, the kinds of materials that ultimately form the foundation of the types of capabilities that David was just talking about. Of course, materials discovery itself is still a very resource intensive process, right? It involves a lot of trial and error. It's beholden to the limitations of traditional modeling and simulation, synthesis and characterization techniques. So meeting the goals that the department has set, right, and accelerating the pace of transformative materials discovery, development, qualification, and deployment really is essential for DOE to execute its mission. It's for America to remain competitive in the 21st century. Now, the emergence of new AI technology, whether it's physics-aware AI frameworks, deep learning, computer vision, generative AI, or agentic AI, amongst others, right, along with a growing availability of very large, often curated data sets, and specifically material science data sets, really is enabling new capabilities for the discovery and design of materials. Now, such capabilities will kind of iteratively couple property prediction, synthesis, characterization, data analysis in a more closed loop learning system, kind of one that is interpretable, trustworthy, and capable of bridging large scales of time and space. Now, ultimately, right, continued development of AI-enabled materials discovery frameworks that integrate advanced experimentation and computational capabilities with AI that can reason, as well as AI that can explain itself, puts the concept of inverse design, right, the design of materials for given property specifications, actually within reach, right? A real holy grail of materials discovery, right? So with that in mind, the Basic Energy Sciences program has interest in receiving pitches that align kind of with this topic. So as I said, this is not an exhaustive list of what we might be interested in. We look forward to I think, seeing the ideas that the small business community kind of puts forward that align with the topic as described here. But just to give some context of things we might care about, these could include the development and utilization of physics-aware AI frameworks and foundation models to orchestrate high-throughput computation, high-fidelity simulations, and automated synthesis and characterization, and thereby enable the design of materials with predictable properties, right? And special emphasis could be on the fundamental understanding and control of underlying mechanisms on the atomistic and electronic level to predict and realize specific physical properties for a wide range of different applications. We'd be interested in things like self-improving closed-loop agentic AI frameworks, ones that have rigorous uncertainty estimation, ultimately to be able to enable inverse design of materials. and proposals that package advanced scientific capabilities into reusable tools. Like, for example, a company that's developed a robust Bayesian inference engine, a physics-informed surrogate model, or a multimodal data fusion framework that other researchers could then readily deploy across many material systems would be a pretty good fit, I think, for the objectives of this call, rather than, for example, one that proposes just to discover the next superconductor or energy storage material. Things that we're definitely not, I think, interested in seeing are really just applications that focus on applying existing AI tools and or on just the optimization of a specific material property, right? So it really is about accelerating discovery of new materials with specific properties that help the department advance its mission. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it now back to David one more time to speak to the last of the 4 topics that we have in this solicitation. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Adam. So achieving AI-driven autonomous labs. These things are already starting to come into existence. If you look up, for instance, laboratory automation for life sciences, there are several companies, I won't mention their names because I don't want to be seen as endorsing one over another, that have warehouses full of hundreds of instruments, wet labs in the case of life sciences. And instead of having people in a traditional wet lab walking from instrument to instrument, carrying beakers and vials and putting them in and then noting what the measurements are, they have that done all robotically. And data, so clients, customers of these companies rent out time. They give instructions for what protocol they want followed, and how many combinatorial versions of that they want followed. You can look up details of these sorts of things. That's one example. Another example is that DOE scientific laboratories want user facilities like synchrotrons, neutron scattering facilities, and so on, want to be able to automate their workflows in ways where instead of having grad students standing at the instrument, loading everything, doing everything, and then waiting for the data to come in, and then analyzing the data offline for a week or 2, and then going back to the instrument and saying, well, now I want to try this. They want to close that loop a lot faster so that you can make changes during the run based on the data, and the data, and it isn't even the student or the professor who makes those changes. The laboratory, through AI, makes those changes itself in order to optimize the outcome of the experiment you want. Those are 2 examples. We're interested in the integration of AI and machine learning with high-performance computing to enable this, which includes the link between edge computing, well, sensors, edge computing, and then the high-performance computing that might be remote. In many cases, it would be useful to collaborate with a DOE user facility. So to bring those people in as consultants or collaborators and really get to know their needs, because in some cases, they will be the customers for this sort of laboratory automation. Within advanced scientific computing research, we are particularly interested in methods, workflows, frameworks that are extensible. So instead of something that is specific, let's say, to one light source, if the methods that you're developing can be used at a light source or in cryo-electron microscopy or at a neutron scattering facility, et cetera, the more generalizable it is, the greater the chances are for commercialization and for general utility in advancing the field. So that's a specific interest of my program in this, but it still could be specific to a particular user facility if that really drives it, and if you can show that will make sense from a business perspective. And with that, I will hand it back to people running the show, and we'll get ready for specific questions on this.
Thank you, David, and thank you, everyone. Before I turn it over to Kelsey on our side to facilitate some of the Q&A, just a couple reminders as we've seen questions coming in and want to just speak overall to the actual application portal. As soon as the application portal AMP you will see opens, we will notify everyone. Obviously, those that have registered and those that have attended this webinar will receive that communication. Everything is outlined on the website, so you're able to begin to collect everything you need to begin and submit that. We would encourage you all to go ahead and submit your access request. That way we can get you into the system, and as soon as it's available, you'll see that tile open up and begin to go in and submit. Tied to that as well, we've had a lot of questions around just number of submissions. Please visit FAQ, the first question there. It will outline how many submissions will be accepted. You can edit your submissions in AMP once it's available up until the deadline. And so if you say submit early and have a few adjustments you want to make, please go in and edit that. Do not resubmit those applications you already have. We will, if we do receive more than 3, accept the last 3 submissions that you receive. But again, important note, you can go in and edit those submissions up until the deadline. So just be mindful of that. Again, we have a number of questions. We will focus in the interest of time over the next 10-15 minutes on specific topic area questions with those folks on the call as well, and reserve some time at the end as well. If folks want to hang on after till 4:30, up until 4:30, we'll try to get through a number of the other questions pertaining to registration, sam.gov. I think we've had a number of questions around that. So Kelsey, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Grayson. If we can advance the slide, I actually think we have one more for Eileen. Yes, because I cannot speak to this. Eileen?
Yeah, just quickly for those applicants who are planning their their project and their work plan, we wanted to make you all aware that if you are selected for an STTR award, you are eligible to apply and receive Department of Energy Scientific Computing Center resources. So you can register, you can request computing time on our scientific computing facility. And this is free of charge. It's not something that you have to include in your budget. It is a request that you make, and then you're granted time on NERSC. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eileen. Okay, if we could advance the slides, I did have a few reminders. So at the end of this webinar, you will be invited to fill out a survey. This survey is going to ask how many pitches you plan to submit to each of the 4 topic areas. So as a reminder, you will be able to submit per company up to 3 pitches across any of the topic areas. This could be 3 in one topic area, 3 separate topic areas, or any combination. We've also seen a couple Q&As come through, but these pitches, this 3 pitch limit, it pertains to this opportunity specifically and will not affect future opportunities. All right, thank you. And the last thing would be a QR code. So you can scan this QR code to access the opportunity page where you can get all of this information, some frequently asked questions we've already seen via email or we were anticipating, and we will be updating the FAQs on the website as well after the webinars. All right. So we'll go into Q&A. Reminder, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom. You may have to hit the 3 dots that say more in order to access this. Our team is going through as quickly as we can. We are going to focus, as Grayson said, on topic-specific questions right now, and at the end we will shift to more program general questions as well as process. But we've got our topic managers on the call. We want to use their time wisely now. So I will get started. And for any questions we don't have a chance to get through, we will be posting updates to the website, and you can always send us an email at SBIR-STTR All right. So for topic 3, does DOE expect phase 1 to include experimental synthesis or characterization of materials, or is a computational/software phase 1 award with experimental validation deferred to phase 2 acceptable?
I think that's one's directed directed towards me. I'm not 100% sure how if I can answer that definitively. I think in principle, it would that sounds like it would be appropriate for phase 1. But you know, at the end of the day, I think can make that assessment when we kind of see the pitch and have a chance to kind of dive into the ideas and consider if it's what we're interested in.
Yeah, that's a great flag, Adam. I will say that the pitch application, we've been dropping the link to the pitch guide it's also on the website. It's 4 questions that have a limited character count. That's how you'll be evaluated. This is intentionally designed as a low lift so you can get your ideas in front of the appropriate people at DOE and be evaluated before moving on to a full application. All right. Let's see. For topic achieving AI-driven autonomous laboratories, must the commercialization targets be laboratories or the grant applicant small business must be the lab itself?
So a lab is not eligible as a small business. I think even our smallest lab is probably too big for that. But a lab could certainly be a partner with a small business. If you look at the history of the SBIR program within the Department of Energy, one of the, not the only way we've used it, but one way we've used SBIR is to develop instrumentation, software, capabilities, whatever, that are needed by DOE user facilities and for which there is no current supplier. So look for those opportunities. It is not a requirement to work with a DOE user facility. If your commercial market is engineering firms, whatever your commercial target is, work with the appropriate people. But in some cases, you may find it helpful to your proposal to take advantage of this taxpayer subsidized research network and tie into it. So it's an opportunity, it's not a requirement.
If I might just kind of like follow on from what David is saying, I would just like to foot stomp his comments on the potential for partnership with the labs, in particular the scientific user facilities. I know from the Basic Energy Sciences program perspective, we steward 12 of the 28 scientific user facilities of the department, and there is just an incredible amount of work that's ongoing kind of in this space of kind of AI and automation across these facilities, our X-ray light sources, neutron sources, and our nanoscale science research centers. As David said, is not a requirement, right? But it is, there's significant opportunity to kind of, I think, leverage the expertise, leverage the resources that we put into this and the work that's already being done to help identify opportunities where the small business community could address challenges and develop technologies, one that would support these facilities and the broader scientific communities that it's our users, as well as potentially lead to technologies that could be commercialized by the company. So excellent suggestion from David regarding working with these folks. I'd highly encourage if possible.
Thank you, Paul. We've got a question. How does DOE define biomolecule? Would small molecule therapeutics be considered biomolecules?
Yeah, for the Scaling the Biotechnology Revolution topic, we're primarily focused on plants and microbes for DOE relevant applications and not focused on health applications. But happy to follow up by email if you guys want to send in a question.
Yes, and if you email the SBIR -STTR ConnectWorks email address, we will be able to connect you with the appropriate DOE folks. All right. Is the biotechnology call looking for using AI tools or developing new AI tools?
Both. And again, happy to follow up with more specifics if you guys have specific questions about applicability.
Okay. Let's see. For subtopic 3, is this topic more focused on leveraging existing AI framework or developing new AI models and methodologies? I believe that's what you just answered, Kari.
Yeah, it could be. I think it is sort of a both options. It really will depend upon the character of the work that is going to be pitched. But I do think both options could be possible depending upon the scope.
Great. For the materials design topic, when you say AI-driven inverse design, do you need to see what we already have, that AI capability built, or is it okay if that's something we're planning to build out during phase 1?
Could you repeat that question, please? I'm not sure I
Absolutely.
fully understood. Yeah.
This is the AI-driven inverse design, and that's in quotes. Do you need to see that we already have that AI capability built out, or is it okay if that's something we're planning to build during phase 1?
No, I don't think you necessarily have to have the platform. I mean, I think part of the benefit of this of the program is to be able to kind of pitch ideas that you believe you have the opportunity to kind of prove out conceptually as a phase 1, and then potentially, if successful, really build a more robust capability in a future phase 2. But we can follow up as needed on this if there's more specifics that you need on that question, and of course look forward to seeing the potential pitch.
Okay. For topic 2, would quantum-enabled technologies that support quantum networking, such as timing integrity verification across quantum networks, be considered responsive, even if they are not specifically focused on computing?
So I think that the application, the intended application, may matter. We don't support, for instance, networking for quantum key distribution. That's a fairly mature technology and outside of the scope of the Department of Energy. So it needs to have some sort of scientific engineering application that's in DOE's mission space. That said, I think the kind of networking, timing and networking that you suggest could be in scope. You just need to make that pitch.
For topic 3, are there any limits about material types, applications, and market size?
Good question. We can assess that when the actual pitch is received. I think, encourage people to think about when it comes to what materials you care about. Think about it in the context of the department's mission, in terms of energy, security, environment, et cetera. I don't want to say anything right now is particularly kind of out of scope until we've had a chance to look at it. But I would not say that any material is in scope. If it was, as like was a previous question related to something that was more relevant to the kind of like human health rather than kind of what our biological environmental research program cares about. And I think if you were to think that you're looking at a material that is more relevant to human health and well-being, that is probably less likely to be in scope than something, for example, that was relevant to, kind of energy storage or, nuclear energy or kind of novel materials for future computing systems, that sort of thing.
Thank you. We have a couple similar questions on topic 4 about AI for network operations. One that says, does this apply to utility distribution networks, or is it specifically for internet traffic? And another that asked if it's specific to a lab environment. So perhaps we can get some more clarity around AI for network operations on topic 4.
So topic 4 is specific to quantum information. So quantum networking is part of that. Classical networking would not be.
Okay. For the materials opportunity, how do we find out more about what AI systems and data sets already exist? And how would we go about getting a pitch to use or integrate with them?
It's a good question. That might be one worth following up on, depending upon the specifics of the pitch, right? You know, we support in the Basic Energy Sciences program a wide range of kind of materials science databases, right? Like the materials project at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory is a good example. But we can certainly, I think, help to kind of direct people appropriately to potential data sets that would be relevant to a pitch that they want to make.
If I can just say something about my answer to the previous question. I thought that the questioner was asking about topic 2. The questioner was asking about topic 4. So classical networking is fine for autonomous laboratory operations, but it needs to be specific to autonomous laboratories.
Okay. Let's see. I'm so sorry. I'm quickly scanning to see if we've got any more for our topic managers before we let them go, because we have, I think, more than enough questions about the program in general, its move to OTC, and the application process that we could use the next 25 minutes. And I'm not seeing anything that jumps out at me, but if we did miss something or you're still thinking about them, we will be going through all of these open questions and making sure we get answers to the people who submitted them, or posting them on the website if they're relevant to the larger community. So before we let them go, I would just like to thank again David, Kari, and Adam for their time today. All right. For this next portion of the Q&A, ConnectWorks is able to speak to, so myself and Grayson will be speaking to any questions about the application process. We're also doing our best to kind of answer as we go, and we will continue to do so, but referring these open questions that are answered by FAQs already on the website. And we'll be channeling questions about the DOE program specifically to Eileen and Ben Schrager. So I think the first is a general question, Eileen or Ben, but can you speak more to the restructuring of the DOE SBIR program and who are new topic managers? Maybe just let them go, but
Yeah, so hi all, Ben Schrager with DOE's OTC, Office of Technology Commercialization. And the question is a very good one. As many of you probably know, the SBIR program used to be housed in DOE's Office of Science. It was for many years, and it was the decision of our leadership to transfer the program to OTC so that we could further emphasize commercialization goals of the program and consolidate a lot of functions of the program within this office. So more information on that is on our website. In terms of topic managers, you've just met some of them. And for the larger releases, there will be other names as well.
thank you, Ben. Okay, I'm just going to start going and from the top. We have a question of, are these projects going to be cooperative agreements since they are milestone-based, grants, or another contract vehicle?
I can jump in here. So these are partnership intermediary agreement models. So these are firm fixed price, milestone-based repayment or milestone-based payments rather than traditional repayments or cooperative agreement structures. We'll have additional information on this on the website on the specific breakdown, but the idea is that you'll have a list of milestones you have to meet, and as those are completed, to be paid out for each of those objectives completed.
Yeah, and a great follow-on question for you, Felipe, would be, how are the go, no-go milestones defined for advancing through phases of the project. So phase 2, phase 2.2, etc.
There'll be multiple components required to move on to new phases that'll include your project plan and other requirements along statutory review and other needed materials to be determined whether or not you're applicable to move from phase 1 to a phase 2.
All right. We have many questions that came through about sam.gov. Namely, Grayson, do you mind jumping in here? Because I know you had some more information about this one.
Yes, I'm gonna try my best to group a few of these great questions that came through. Just bear with me 1 second.
I can also speak a little bit to sam.gov, Grayson, while you're kind of grouping those together if you want.
Yeah, basically DOE, it comes down to the questions seem to be whether or not they need to be registered by the pitch phase and whether or not potentially that information was conflicting with something in the DOE SAM guide. So
I can jump in. Apologies if there was any confusion. You do not have to have your SAM registration completed for the pitch, but you will need to have it completed for the full application. That includes your UEI specifically, so we can track and trace and then fully award the agreement as part of the final selection.
Perfect. All
Yep.
right.
Can I just add one thing there, which is that you should get started on your sam.gov registration right away because it can be a 6-week process. So hopefully not, but the sooner you get started, the better.
Perfect. For STTR specifically, can the PI be employed by both the small business and the non-for-profit institution?
I believe we have eligibility guidelines on the website on specific ownership and participation requirements. Eileen, if you want to chip in, if you have any other context we can reference
Yeah, as
here.
long as you meet the eligibility requirements, the 51, if you're applying for SBIR, the PI must be 51% employed by the small business. As long as you meet those, the other part of your employment is not part of the eligibility requirements, I guess.
Can your team partner for STTR or a subcontractor change from the project pitch before a full application if encouraged?
Yeah, I can jump in. That would be allowable. You can make changes to your team between the pitch and the full application.
Okay. What is the matching fund percentage requirement and eligible sources for these funds?
So this is strictly a phase 1 solicitation, so there's no cost share required as part of this opportunity.
And to be clear, for phase 1, phase 2, there's no cost share requirement. Only at some much later phases of the program would there be a potential cost share requirement, but not applicable for this current opportunity.
And Ben, just tied to that, I think there was a question around can phase 1, the funds be used for ODCs or other direct charges? I'm interpreting
So
ODC.
to clarify, for referring back to the firm fixed price milestone, there's not a specific budget table or a specific cost requirements around specific cost categories. It's strictly based on performance. So as long as objectives are completed, we don't require reporting of specific budget items.
Can you provide more clarity on the venture capital eligibility? The slide has said that DOE has opted out of this option. Does that mean that small businesses with venture capital funding cannot apply?
So the requirements are probably I'm sure they're posted on the website. And I would double check those requirements there. But there are some allowances, existing allowances around venture capital ownership that involve minority ownership by venture capitalists, not majority ownership by venture capitalists. So there's some details and some nuances there that I don't want to get wrong. So I would go to the website and check them out and make sure that you comply, that you're not going to apply and not be eligible for the program based on your ownership structure.
Thank you. Will there be a list of participating companies or organizations interested in partnering for this opportunity?
No, I don't believe we'll be hosting a TV partner list at this time.
Okay.
If you are interested in partnering with the national labs, I would recommend labpartnering.org as a place to start.
How does DOE decide which are SBIRs and which are more appropriate to offer as STTRs? And I can also speak to this because in the full application, if you are invited from the pitch to a full application, we encourage you to review the eligibility requirements on the website, and you are able to select SBIR, STTR, or both, provided you meet those requirements. We saw that one come through a couple times.
And Kelsey,
right.
I see some questions, and for the OTC group, I don't know if we can or cannot answer this, but I'll just try to group a number of these together. A lot of questions around the pitch evaluation. Will feedback be released? Will folks know maybe areas they fell short? Will it be internal or external reviewers? And then ultimately, I think that's centered around the confidentiality of the reviews. Will they be treated with the highest confidentiality? Is there any points we can share on just the review process, the confidentiality side of it, and ultimately if it's internal or external to DOE?
So I can speak to the confidentiality portion. So all applications are treated as classified, as confidential, unclassified information. It'll be handled with all the required sensitivities that any application for any other funding opportunity would be handled. And then as for the review and feedback for the pitches, there will be a small review provided, or small amount of feedback provided for each pitch that are not selected. What else was I missing at that point? Apologies.
I assume that there are SBR data marking requirements in the application. Is that correct, Felipe? And those, the government is prohibited from publishing information that you mark as proprietary because it's an SBR application for 20 years.
Yeah.
But you do have to specifically mark that information.
Yeah, and Felipe, I tried to group a number together, was just more so speaking on if we're able to release if this is internal to DOE or external reviewers, just kind of the reviewer panel makeup.
Not sure we'll get too into that at this time. More to come, but in the past, I can say that for the full application review, there's generally been a mix of internal DOE and external expert review panelists who would review each application, and we do expect to follow a similar model, at least for the full application side.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
A very general question. If they have a pitch that could potentially cover 2 of the topics, you have suggestions for narrowing it down?
So you got to pick one topic per pitch. You are eligible to submit up to 3 pitches to 3 different topic areas. But you really should just pick the topic that is best aligned with what you are proposing.
Okay. If we submit a pitch now, but a better fit topic will open up in a future announcement, is there any way to switch over, or are we locked in once we submit?
So we have the topics open now, and then there'll be a lot more topics open later this fall is the plan. And each one has their separate caps of what you can submit. So you would then have a new set of 3 to apply with in the fall.
Okay. So I think we're still seeing a lot of questions about how projects will be paid and if there's a budget table. if we could provide a bit more context on that, I think that could be helpful.
Yeah, again, since this is firm fixed price milestone-based payments, there will be essentially a milestone table that covers the different deliverables at each major point throughout your project's lifecycle. Those will be negotiated and coordinated with your specific project manager at DOE. And then as those deliverables are completed, you'll be paid out for that completed activity. Again, we do not require a specific breakdown of your budget or specific approvals around cost categories or cost readability. This is strictly an objective oriented repayment system of as long as everything is completed to the requirements that DOE has set forth, companies will be reimbursed for that, those completed work.
Okay. Is the DOE Genesis Phase 1 opportunity the same as or replacing a usual Phase 1 opportunity?
You can think of this one as like the first release in our new program. So I would start to think of these as a new set of releases. We'll have a lot more information about the annual structure of releases, but we are moving past how we used to structure things before.
This is, I think, a good one. Still some questions around the 3-pitch limit. So are we allowed to have different teams at a singular company submit a pitch to the same topic? Would that count as 2 of the 3 pitches a company is allowed, or just 1?
If they're 2 different projects, they're going to be 2 different pitches, yes. And they
Yes.
can be submitted to the same topic. There's nothing preventing you from submitting multiple pitches to the same topic, but you are limited to 3 pitches in the solicitation.
Yes, so I would flag that the pitches will be reviewed in the order they are submitted. So the last 3 that are submitted would be the ones that are reviewed if more than 3 are submitted. So please ensure that if you do have 2 different teams or 2 different project ideas coming from the same company, you are coordinating to make sure that that company limit of 3 is observed. There are new products which could be the focus of a completed Phase 2 SBIR. Can we spin off those new products into a Phase 1 application?
I would say that that's acceptable. Remember, your Phase 1 application has to be couched as a feasibility study. You can be pivoting with your technology and doing something new with it, saying, we want to see now if it can do this. So you don't want to say in your Phase 1 application, oh, we're going to try to figure out how to manufacture this or scale up or that kind of thing. But it does need to be what you're trying to make your technology do about the Phase 1 study.
And to expand on that, this is applicable for all DOE awards. This should not be duplicative of any other active DOE award that the small business might have received. This should be unique to the specific scope and project.
Yeah, the rule is you can't get paid twice for doing the same work. So you can submit the same work to multiple agencies, multiple DOE opportunities. You cannot accept 2 awards where you're doing the same work.
Okay. In our application, if we want to mention a commercial partnership that supports our research proposal, does this partnership company need to be based in the US?
Will they be doing work on the SBIR project? Can you read that again? I missed a little
Sure.
bit of it.
It sounds like it would be a commercial partnership that is supporting the research proposal. And I would say that it depends on if it's a letter of support saying we think this is a good idea, or if they would be doing work, which I would allow Eileen you to expand upon.
You cannot pay that overseas company using SBIR funds. If you have other funding, they can participate in the research project, and you can pay them, but with other funding, but you cannot pay them with SBIR funds. And the other thing, note that you are going to be submitting a foreign disclosure relationships form as part of your application because the the Congress is concerned and wants to make sure that there are not foreign risks associated with theft of intellectual property. There's nothing wrong with having foreign relationships. We want you all to have foreign relationships. We want you to have customers overseas, but you do want to you will have to disclose those relationships as part of your application.
Yeah, and just to clarify, those disclosures will occur during the full application phase for invited pitches only. But if you wanted to preview what those disclosures might look like, they are on the FAQ page of the website through the nature of having a current phase 2 opportunity open as well. Okay. Does the Genesis mission allow for TABA?
Yes. TABA services, the TABA funds will be available to selected awardees.
Okay, and as a follow-up, someone said that they had used a specific TABA provider for phase 0 services. Would they be qualified for reauthorized TABA services available in the new opportunity?
So phase 0 was our former application assistance program. That's different than TABA. I happen to know that the phase 0 provider was also a TABA provider, so I don't know if that's the confusing part here. As an awardee, you will be eligible for TABA services, but that is not the same thing as the phase 0 application assistance program. Hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you. Is there a breakdown for how distribution will be spread between SBIR and STTR awards?
On the first slide, it shows the funding information. SBIR is a tax of 3.2% on extramural R&D. STTR is 0.45%. So that tells you the funding that is available for each of the programs. Now, if you can apply to both. If you fulfill the requirements, there's an overlap. There's a Venn diagram of the requirements. If you fulfill the requirements of both SBIR and STTR, we encourage you to apply for both because those are two pots of money. And if you do submit a meritorious application, you can imagine the program offices have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of selecting a both meritorious application for award. That makes sense. But don't try to apply for both if it doesn't make sense for your project. I mean, there's requirements on research institutions and where the PI works and all that, and level of effort, who's doing what of the part of the work plan. You really want to go with the project and the work plan that makes the most sense for your study.
We have a question. Can one company make 3 SBIR pitches as well as 3 STTR pitches? The answer is no. There are 3 pitches total, and you are not selecting whether or not you would be applying for SBIR, STTR, or both until and if invited for a full application.
Kelsey, just jumping in to call out a time check. We have just a few more minutes. I know as we look to wrap up and we can mention our upcoming webinar and then just overall process. I just want to say for those folks that have submitted questions as well that have not been marked anonymous, we will, if they're direct follow-up, whether it be specific eligibility, we can reach directly to you. But understand there's a number of questions that we have not been able to answer, and due to the overwhelming interest and excitement, and looking forward to going through those. And again, as we mentioned earlier, reviewing and updating our website as well with some questions we may have missed or may be beneficial to add to the group. But just again, I'll turn it over to you, Kelsey. But again, from our side, thank you as well for the engagement.
Yep. I think that's a great flag. In case people are wondering, we have over 200 questions that came in. So we did our best to elevate the ones that we thought haven't already been addressed in the FAQs. If you didn't hear your question, there's a chance it's already on the website, or we will be putting it up there shortly. As our final reminder, this is how you can scan this QR code, or we'll find our website, SBIR-STTR at ConnectWorks. You are welcome to use the contact information there to get in touch with ConnectWorks, and we will be able to, if not answer your question, connect you with the folks who can. So we really are here to help you access these opportunities. And we're dropping our website and email address in the chat right now. All right. Thank you all so much for spending your afternoon with us. Like I said, we'll be working through these FAQ questions, and there's another webinar next week if you want to come hang out with us again. It'll largely be a lot of the same information, and if you aren't able to make both, the recordings will be posted to the website.
Thank you, everybody.